I'm Adriana, 35, and I once believed in fairy tale marriages. My career in cybersecurity consulting was soaring when I met him. We seemed perfect until that rainy night when everything changed. He left me stranded on a rural road to teach me a lesson about respect. What he didn't expect was the black truck that appeared minutes later. My bodyguard stepped out, and in that moment, I knew my husband had made his last mistake. Where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments, hit that like and subscribe button, and settle in as I share how my perfect marriage became my perfect escape. I built my reputation in cybersecurity by being meticulous, analytical, and always one step ahead of potential threats. The irony that I missed the warning signs in my own marriage still strikes me sometimes. Before James, I was focused entirely on my career consulting for major tech companies on their security vulnerabilities. My clients included Fortune 500 corporations who trusted me with their most sensitive systems. I met James Armstrong at a corporate gala where I was hired to evaluate the venue's security systems before a major tech announcement. He was 38, confident, and worked as a financial advisor for wealthy clients. Our eyes met across the room as I was discreetly testing the alarm response time. He approached with a glass of champagne and a curious smile. "I've been watching you," he said. "You're clearly not here for the open bar or networking." I explained my role without revealing too many details. His interest seemed genuine, and by the end of the evening he had my number. Our first date happened 3 days later at an exclusive restaurant where the wait list was typically months long. James had connections everywhere. Our romance moved quickly. Weekend getaways to coastal bed and breakfasts, surprise gifts delivered to my office, and thoughtful notes left on my laptop when I woke up for early client calls. He remembered details about my favorite books, wines, and the specific way I took my coffee. 8 months into our relationship, during a sunset dinner in Maui, he proposed with a vintage diamond ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "You're the most fascinating woman I've ever met," he told me as he slid the ring onto my finger. "I want to build a life with someone as brilliant as you." Our wedding was everything I thought I wanted. James spared no expense, insisting on a ceremony at a historic mansion with 200 guests. My parents, both retired professors from Wisconsin, seemed slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur, but were happy to see me settled with someone who appeared so devoted. The first year of marriage felt like an extension of our courtship. We purchased a beautiful colonial home in an exclusive suburb with a state-of-the-art security system that I personally enhanced. My business continued to thrive with more high-profile clients seeking my expertise after a major data breach at a competitor's firm made headlines. James seemed supportive of my success at first. He would brag about my accomplishments to his colleagues and friends, introducing me as the security genius who could hack the Pentagon if she wanted to. I noticed he particularly enjoyed the impressed reactions from his male friends. "My wife is changing how corporations think about digital security," he would say, his arm wrapped firmly around my waist. It was during this time that my childhood friend Marcus reached out. We had grown up next door to each other in Madison, and he had gone into personal security after his military service. He was now running his own firm, providing protection for executives and public figures. "Audrey, with the clients you're handling and the information you have access to, you should consider having some personal security," he suggested during one of our monthly catch-up calls. I laughed it off initially, but after receiving some concerning anonymous emails following a high-profile security audit, I reconsidered. Marcus assigned Michael Sullivan to be my primary security detail for client meetings and travel. James initially seemed impressed by this development, viewing it as another sign of my professional status. "My wife is so important she needs a bodyguard now," he would tell people at social gatherings, squeezing my shoulder just a little too tightly. Looking back, I should have recognized these moments as the first cracks in our foundation. The small controlling behaviors disguised as protectiveness. The way he began questioning my late nights working. How he would text repeatedly when I was in meetings. But in my mind, we were still the perfect couple with the perfect life. I didn't see how James's smile would tighten when clients called outside business hours. I missed how he would stand slightly too close when I spoke with male colleagues. I didn't register the significance when he suggested I didn't need to work so hard, given his own successful career. The signs were there from the beginning, hiding in plain sight behind designer suits and romantic gestures. I was a security expert who had missed the most important vulnerability of all the ones sleeping beside me every night. The shift in our relationship was so gradual that I almost convinced myself it wasn't happening. James began commenting on my work schedule with increasing frequency, his supportive facade slowly crumbling. "You missed dinner again," he would say, standing in the kitchen with arms crossed as I returned home from a late client emergency. "I waited 2 hours. I texted you that the meeting was running long." I would respond, exhaustion seeping into my voice. "You always have an excuse, Adriana. Your priorities are clear." These conversations became our new normal. I started rushing through client meetings, checking my phone anxiously, knowing each minute past our agreed return time would fuel another argument. My colleagues noticed the change. "Everything okay?" my associate Sarah asked after I abruptly cut short a productive session with a new client. "Fine, just need to get home," I replied, already gathering my papers. 6 months into our marriage, James began questioning my phone usage. It started innocently enough, borrowing my phone when his battery died, then scrolling through messages while it was unlocked. "Who's Daniel?" he asked casually one evening, my phone in his hand. "The CISO at Next Gen Tech. We're implementing their new security protocol." I explained, not thinking much of it. "You text him a lot," James continued, thumb scrolling through our conversation. "Pretty friendly for a client." The first major argument exploded when a ransomware attack hit one of my biggest clients at 2 a.m. I received the emergency alert and was pulling on clothes when James woke up. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, sitting up sharply in bed. "Meditech's systems are down. Their patient data is at risk. I need to get there now." "It's the middle of the night, Adriana. Let someone else handle it." "I'm their lead consultant. There is no someone else," I explained, grabbing my laptop bag. His face hardened as he stood blocking the bedroom doorway. "So some company is more important than our marriage, than respecting your husband." That night set a pattern. Each emergency, each late client meeting, each business trip became a battleground. James began checking my location throughout the day, claiming he was just making sure I was safe. He questioned male names in my contact list, client dinner receipts, even the clothes I wore to meetings. "That skirt seems short for a professional setting," he commented as I dressed for a conference presentation. My friendship with Michael, my bodyguard, particularly aggravated James. Michael maintained absolute professionalism, but the nature of his job required him to be nearby when I worked with sensitive information or traveled. He became a consistent presence, driving me to important meetings, standing discreetly in the background at conferences, ensuring my safety during international trips. "Do you really need him hovering around all the time?" James would ask. "People will think there's something going on." "It's his job, James. Marcus assigned him specifically because he's the best." James would scoff. "I bet he is. I see how he looks at you." Despite these growing tensions, my professional reputation continued to rise. I secured a major contract with a government contractor that would involve designing a completely new security architecture. The project would be challenging, high-profile, and lucrative. When I shared the news with James over dinner, his reaction was tepid at best. "Great," he said flatly. "More time away from home." I found myself making smaller in his presence, speaking less at dinner parties, changing outfits if he frowned at my choice, texting constant updates about my whereabouts. My confident professional self and my diminishing personal self were becoming two separate people. The contrast became starkly apparent at a dinner party we hosted for some of James's colleagues and their spouses. I had prepared a brief toast, welcoming everyone as James had suggested. But when I began to speak, he interrupted. "What my lovely wife means to say is that we're delighted you could all come tonight," he said, placing his hand firmly on my shoulder. "Adriana works with computers all day, so she sometimes forgets how to talk to actual people." Everyone laughed as if he'd made a charming joke. I stood frozen glass in hand as James smoothly took over. Later that night, when I mentioned how embarrassed I'd felt, he seemed genuinely confused. "I was helping you out. You were rambling and looked nervous," he said. "I did you a favor." I began to question my own perceptions. Was I too sensitive? Was I imagining the controlling behavior Michael noticed the change in me during our security detail drives? "You're quieter these days," he observed carefully, eyes on the road. "Just tired," I replied automatically. The answer I gave everyone now. He nodded but didn't press further. That was one thing I appreciated about Michael. He never pushed, but I always felt he was paying attention. It would matter more than I could have imagined later. "We should consolidate our accounts," James suggested one morning over breakfast, 8 months into our marriage. It would be more efficient for our financial planning. The request seemed reasonable enough. James was a financial advisor after all. I agreed, providing him access to my accounts, including the separate business account I maintained for my consulting work. 2 weeks later, I noticed unusual activity transfers from my business account into our joint account that I hadn't initiated. When I questioned James, he seemed offended. "I'm trying to optimize our tax situation," he explained. "Do you not trust me with money? Is that it?" I backed down, ignoring the unease settling in my stomach. That same week, I discovered he had installed a tracking app on my car's GPS system. When confronted, his explanation was ready. "With your high-profile clients, I worry about your safety. What kind of husband would I be if I didn't look out for you?" The incidents multiplied. One evening, I returned from a client meeting to find James at my laptop. He closed it quickly when I entered. "What were you doing?" I asked, setting down my briefcase. "Just checking the weather for this weekend," he replied, though I noticed he was flustered. The next morning, I discovered critical files for an upcoming presentation were missing. Hours of work completely gone. "I didn't touch anything," James insisted when I asked if he'd seen the files. "Maybe you forgot to save them. You have been working too hard lately." Had I forgotten to save them? I was usually so careful with backups. Yet James seemed so certain, so concerned about my apparent forgetfulness, that I began to doubt myself. This pattern repeated in different forms. Conversations we had would later be denied. Promises he made would be forgotten with the insistence that I had misunderstood. Plans would change without my knowledge, and somehow it was always my fault for not paying attention. We never said we'd go to Sarah's birthday dinner. He would insist, despite clear texts showing otherwise. "You must have confused it with something else." My once sharp memory now felt foggy and unreliable. I started keeping notes of our conversations, double-checking everything, yet still found myself apologizing for misunderstandings I wasn't sure were mine. The restaurant incident marked another escalation. We were celebrating the successful completion of a major project, and the waiter had been particularly attentive, refilling my water glass frequently and making recommendations based on my preferences. "The wild mushroom risotto would suit your taste, I think," the waiter suggested after I mentioned enjoying earthy flavors. When he left to place our orders, James's expression darkened. "He seems very interested in what suits your taste." "He's just being a good waiter," I replied, taking a sip of wine. James remained silent through most of dinner. When I excused myself to use the restroom, I returned to find him gone. He had paid the bill and left without a word, taking our car. I stood outside the restaurant, confusion giving way to humiliation as I called Michael to pick me up. "He just left you there?" Michael asked, his usual professional reserve slipping for a moment. "There must have been some emergency," I said weakly, though we both knew there wasn't. James's criticisms became more direct and cutting. My appearance, which he once complimented constantly, now received regular critique. "That outfit makes you look boxy," he would say as I dressed for work. Or, "Your hair looked better before. This style ages you." My intelligence, which had initially attracted him, became another target. "That's not how that works, Adriana," he would say dismissively during conversations even about cybersecurity topics in which I was the expert. "Do you even think before you make these decisions?" became a common refrain when I scheduled client meetings or made plans with the few friends I still maintained contact with. Michael became my reality check during this period. His consistent presence and respectful treatment stood in stark contrast to my home life. He never questioned my decisions, always addressed me with professional courtesy, and subtly ensured I had space to breathe during our travels together. The incident with my industry award marked a painful milestone. After being recognized with a prestigious innovation award in cybersecurity, I brought the crystal trophy home with genuine pride. James examined it briefly, set it down, and changed the subject. The next day, I found it missing from the shelf where I'd placed it. "Where's my award?" I asked, searching the living room. "Oh, that thing was just collecting dust," James replied casually. "I put it away." I later discovered it in the trash wrapped in newspaper as if to hide it. When confronted, James claimed he'd accidentally knocked it over while cleaning and it had broken. There wasn't a scratch on it when I retrieved it. My work began to suffer for the first time in my career. During client calls, I would lose my train of thought, doubting my own expertise. I started checking and rechecking my work obsessively, fearful of making mistakes that James might use as evidence of my incompetence. During this period, I confided some of my concerns to my assistant Rachel after she commented on my appearance one morning. "You seem exhausted lately," she said gently. "Is everything okay at home?" The floodgates opened and I shared some of James's controlling behaviors. The relief of speaking the truth was short-lived. Somehow James found out about our conversation. "Airing our dirty laundry to your employees," he confronted me that evening, making me sound like some kind of monster. He didn't speak to me for 5 days afterward, creating an unbearable tension in our home. I found myself walking on eggshells, measuring every word, analyzing every decision through the lens of how James might react. The fear became a constant companion. Each day driving home from work, I would sit in my car outside our house, taking deep breaths, preparing myself for whatever mood awaited me inside. Michael noticed this ritual. "You know, you can always call me," he said quietly one evening as he dropped me off. "Any time, not just for work." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The woman who fearlessly protected million-dollar systems now feared walking into her own home. The woman I saw in the mirror each morning looked familiar but felt like a stranger. When had I started hunching my shoulders, When had my voice grown so quiet? When had I begun second-guessing every thought I was disappearing bit by bit, and the most frightening part was how normal it had begun to feel? The breaking point came in October, 18 months into our marriage. I had been invited to speak at a major cybersecurity conference in Seattle, an opportunity that would significantly raise my professional profile. The conference organizers had arranged for my travel and accommodations, including a suite at the conference hotel for the 3-day event. "I'll come with you," James announced when I mentioned the trip. "I could use a few days in Seattle." His tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Despite knowing his presence would complicate things, I agreed, hoping a change of scenery might improve our increasingly tense relationship. From the moment we arrived, James monitored my movements closely. He insisted on attending the welcome reception, keeping his arm firmly around my waist as I tried to network with industry peers. Several times I noticed Michael watching from a discreet distance, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes alert. "Do you really need your watchdog here?" James whispered harshly when he noticed Michael. "This is a security conference. What do you think is going to happen?" "It's standard protocol," I explained quietly. "The company policy requires it for all speakers." The first day of presentations went smoothly, with James sitting in the back of the room during my talk on emerging ransomware threats. That evening, we were invited to a dinner with several conference speakers and major industry figures' connections that could lead to valuable opportunities. Throughout the meal, I engaged in discussions about zero-day vulnerabilities and emerging security frameworks. James initially maintained a charming facade, introducing himself as the lucky man married to the security genius. But as the evening progressed and the attention remained focused on technical matters, he couldn't contribute to his demeanor darkened. After I spent several minutes discussing a potential collaboration with the CISO of a major healthcare network, James abruptly interrupted. "I'm sure my wife would love to continue this conversation, but we should discuss your rates first," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Adriana sometimes forgets that her time is valuable." The table fell awkwardly silent. The CISO gave me a confused look before excusing himself to get another drink. As soon as he left, James leaned close to my ear. "You've been ignoring me all night while flirting with every man at this table," he hissed. "I'm networking, James. This is why we're here," I whispered back, mortified. "We're here because I allowed it," he replied, his fingers digging into my thigh under the table. The rest of the dinner proceeded in uncomfortable tension. I made excuses to end the evening early, aware of the professional damage being done. Back in our hotel room, James exploded. "You made me look like an idiot," he shouted, pacing the room, talking over my head, excluding me from conversations. "These are technical discussions related to my work," I tried to explain. "I wasn't—" "Your work, your career, your connections," he mimicked. "What about us? What about my needs?" The argument escalated until James swept his arm across the desk where my presentation materials for the next day were arranged. My laptop crashed to the floor, papers scattered, and my backup drive skidded under the bed. I stood frozen, staring at my materials, hours of preparation destroyed in seconds. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and texted Michael. "Need backup materials for tomorrow. Can you help?" James grabbed my phone, reading the message. "Running to your bodyguard again." "What exactly is your relationship with him?" "He's my security detail, James. It's his job to assist me." "His job is to protect you from external threats," James sneered. "But who protects you from your own poor decisions?" Michael arrived 20 minutes later with a backup laptop and copies of my presentation. James retreated to the bathroom, refusing to open the door when Michael knocked. I accepted the materials with shaking hands. "Everything okay?" Michael asked quietly, his eyes taking in the scattered papers and my clearly distressed state. "Just a small accident," I lied. "Thank you for coming so quickly." After Michael left, James emerged from the bathroom, his anger seemingly replaced by cold detachment. We slept in silence that night, separated by an ocean of unspoken words in the king-sized hotel bed. The next morning, I delivered my presentation with as much professionalism as I could muster, but my usual confidence was noticeably absent. Several attendees approached afterward with concerned questions about whether I was feeling well. I made excuses about a migraine. I contacted the conference organizers and regretfully explained that I needed to withdraw from the final day's panel discussion due to a family emergency. They were understanding but clearly disappointed. Another career opportunity sacrificed at the altar of my crumbling marriage. We checked out early the original 3-day trip cut to barely 36 hours. The drive home would take nearly 4 hours, mostly along rural highways cutting through Washington state before reaching our suburb outside Portland. The first hour passed in complete silence. Heavy rain began to fall as we left the urban areas behind fat droplets splattering against the windshield and reducing visibility. James drove tensely, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Around the 2-hour mark, he finally spoke. "You embarrassed me in front of all those people." "That wasn't my intention," I replied carefully, watching raindrops race down my passenger window. "Nothing ever is it? You never intend to undermine me, to make me look foolish to prioritize everyone else. It just happens." "James, I was there to speak about cybersecurity. That's my job." "Your job?" He spat the words. "What about your job as my wife?" The storm intensified, thunder rumbling overhead as we traveled down a particularly isolated stretch of highway. No other cars were visible through the downpour. "You need to learn respect, Adriana." James continued, his voice eerily calm now. "You need to understand there are consequences for your actions." Without warning, he pulled the car onto the shoulder of the road, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The windshield wipers swept frantically against the torrent as he put the car in park and turned to me. "Get out," he said simply. I thought I'd misheard. "What?" "Get out of the car. Maybe a little time alone in the rain will help you appreciate what you have. Help you remember your priorities." "James, we're in the middle of nowhere. It's pouring. This isn't funny." "It's not meant to be funny. It's meant to teach you a lesson about respect." His voice was frighteningly devoid of emotion. "Get out or I'll remove you myself." The realization that he was serious washed over me like the rain outside. With trembling fingers, I unbuckled my seatbelt and reached for the door handle. "Your phone," he demanded, holding out his hand. I hesitated. "I need it to call for help." "That's the point, Adriana. You rely on too many people who aren't your husband. Tonight you have no one but me. When you've learned your lesson, I'll come back for you." Knowing resistance would only escalate the situation, I handed over my phone. As I stepped out into the torrential rain, the cold immediately pierced through my light conference attire, a blouse and pencil skirt never meant for October storms. James leaned across to pull the passenger door closed. Through the window, I could see his face impassive and unmoved by my circumstance. 37 miles from home, he said through the partially lowered window. Think about what kind of wife you want to be during your walk. Without another word, he raised the window and pulled away, taillights disappearing into the curtain of rain, leaving me alone on the deserted rural road. I stood there, rain plastering my hair to my face, my clothes already soaked through. The absurdity and cruelty of the situation momentarily paralyzed me. Thunder cracked overhead, and I flinched, reality crashing back. My security training kicked in. I needed to assess my situation and options. No phone. No shelter nearby. Heavy rain. Limited visibility. Rural location with minimal traffic. Unsuitable clothing for the conditions. Risk of hypothermia if exposed for too long. I began walking in the direction we had been traveling, staying on the gravel shoulder. Each step in my heeled pumps was treacherous on the slick surface. After 15 minutes without seeing a single vehicle, I removed my shoes, preferring bare feet to the risk of a fall. The rain showed no signs of letting up. My thoughts raced between practical concerns about my immediate safety and the devastating realization that my marriage had come to this, being abandoned on a rural road as punishment for perceived slights. Would James actually return? Was this a temporary lesson, or had he truly left me here? I had no way of knowing, and the uncertainty was almost as frightening as the situation itself. As I trudged forward, soaked and shivering, headlights appeared in the distance behind me. For a moment, I thought James had reconsidered. But as the vehicle drew closer, I recognized the distinctive outline of a black truck, Michael's truck. The vehicle slowed alongside me, and the passenger window lowered. Michael's concerned face appeared, taking in my drenched state with a quick assessment. "Adriana," he said, his usual professional tone tinged with barely controlled anger. "Get in." I didn't question how he had found me. I simply yanked open the door and climbed inside, water streaming from my clothes onto the leather seat. As he pulled back onto the road, Michael reached behind the seat and handed me a blanket. "The emergency tracker in your conference badge," he explained, answering my unasked question. "It activated when you deviated from your expected route and then stopped moving in an unusual location." I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders, teeth chattering too much to respond immediately. The truck's heater blasted warm air, a stark contrast to the cold that had seeped into my bones. "James?" Michael asked, simply, eyes fixed on the road ahead. That one word, the question behind it so evident, broke something inside me. The carefully constructed facade I had maintained crumbled completely. "He left me there," I whispered, "to teach me a lesson about respect." Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but his voice remained steady. "Has this happened before?" "Not this exactly, but—" I paused, the full weight of my situation finally impossible to deny. "Things have been escalating for months. The control, the criticism, the isolation." I found myself recounting incidents I had previously minimized or excused: the phone monitoring, the financial control, the gaslighting, the public humiliation. Once I started, I couldn't stop, the words pouring out like the rain still beating against the truck. Michael listened without interruption. When I finally fell silent, he spoke carefully. "I've suspected for some time. There were signs, but I couldn't intervene without your acknowledgement of the situation." "You knew?" I asked, surprised. "I'm trained to recognize patterns of control and potential danger," he replied. "But my primary responsibility was to respect your autonomy while ensuring your physical safety." "Where are we going?" I asked suddenly, realizing we weren't heading toward my home. "A secure hotel," Michael answered. "Unless you specifically want to return home right now." The thought of facing James in my current state sent a wave of dread through me. "No," I said quietly. "Not home." Michael nodded, taking the next exit toward the city center. "I have a protocol for situations like this. If you agree, we'll get you settled somewhere safe, and then discuss next steps when you're ready." In the warmth of the truck, with the distance from James growing with each mile, I felt something unexpected: relief. Not happiness, not peace, but the simple relief of not having to pretend anymore. The mask I had worn for so long could finally come off. "Thank you," I said softly, looking out at the rain that had nearly broken me, but had instead set me free. Michael drove me to a boutique hotel in downtown Portland, where the security firm had an established relationship. He spoke briefly with the manager while I waited in the truck, still wrapped in the blanket, my wet clothes clinging uncomfortably to my skin. "Room 412 is ready," Michael informed me as he returned. "It's a corner suite with good sightlines and multiple exit routes." Even in this situation, his security training remained evident. He escorted me through a side entrance to avoid the lobby, maintaining a professional distance while ensuring my safety. Once in the suite, he performed a quick sweep before nodding with satisfaction. "I'll wait outside while you change," he said, gesturing to a duffel bag he had brought in. "Emergency kit, basic clothes, toiletries." Alone in the bathroom, I peeled off my soaked clothing and stood under the shower's hot spray, trying to wash away more than just the physical chill. When I emerged in the plain but dry t-shirt and sweatpants from the emergency kit, Michael was on the phone in the suite's living area. "Sarah will be here in 30 minutes, he explained, ending the call. "She's our firm's liaison for sensitive situations." My phone had begun buzzing relentlessly from where it sat on the coffee table. Michael had apparently recovered it from James, though he didn't explain how. James's name flashed on the screen with increasing frequency. "You don't have to answer," Michael said simply. I nodded, watching the phone vibrate until it finally stopped. The temporary silence felt like a reprieve. "I need to reschedule tomorrow's meetings," I said, trying to focus on practical matters. "Already contacted Rachel," Michael replied. "She's handling your calendar, no details provided beyond a personal emergency." The fact that he had anticipated this need and acted on it brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It had been so long since someone had considered my needs without ulterior motives. Sarah arrived precisely on schedule. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and the calm demeanor of someone accustomed to crisis situations. "Michael has briefed me on the immediate circumstances," she said after introductions. "But I'd like to hear from you what support you need right now." What followed was a conversation unlike any I'd had during my marriage. Sarah listened without judgment as I described the pattern of control that had gradually tightened around my life. She didn't question my perceptions or suggest I was overreacting. She simply believed me. "What you're describing is a textbook escalation of domestic abuse," Sarah explained gently. "The isolation, the gaslighting, the financial control, and now this abandonment. These are all tactics to maintain power and control." Hearing the word abuse applied to my situation sent a shock through my system. In my mind, abuse meant bruises and black eyes, not subtle manipulation and psychological control. "But he's never hit me," I said weakly. "Physical violence is only one form of abuse," Sarah responded. "Emotional and psychological abuse can be just as damaging, and they often precede physical violence." She connected me with a domestic abuse counselor who agreed to a video call that same evening. The counselor. Lisa walked me through various patterns of abusive behavior, and I found myself nodding with increasing frequency as she described situations eerily similar to my own experiences. "The most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is often when the victim begins to leave," Lisa cautioned toward the end of our call. "Your safety needs to be the priority right now." After the call, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything I had learned. The revelation that I, a successful professional who helped others secure their digital lives, had been so thoroughly manipulated in my personal life was difficult to accept. What do I do now? I asked, looking between Sarah and Michael. That's entirely your decision, Sarah replied. We can provide security support resources and guidance, but the choices must be yours. For the first time in months, someone was emphasizing my agency rather than trying to control my decisions. The responsibility felt simultaneously terrifying and empowering. I need time to think, I said finally. I can't go back home tonight. You can stay here as long as necessary, Sarah assured me. The room is secured under the firm's name, not yours. As Sarah prepared to leave, she provided me with emergency contacts and resources. Michael would remain on duty outside my room overnight, with another security professional relieving him in the morning. Standard protocol, he explained when I expressed concern about the arrangement. We never leave a client in a vulnerable situation. Client. The word reminded me that this was his job, not personal involvement. Yet the care he had shown went beyond professional obligation, and I found myself grateful for the boundaries he maintained. They made me feel safe rather than controlled. That night alone in the hotel room, I checked my phone to find 17 missed calls from James, along with a string of text messages that evolved from angry demands to know my whereabouts, to concerned inquiries about my safety, to accusations that I was deliberately trying to worry him. I sent a single message: I am safe. I need space. His response was immediate. Where are you? I'm coming to get you. I turned off my phone and placed it in the desk drawer. For the first time in months, I slept without the tension of anticipating James's mood or monitoring my behavior. Despite everything, it was the most peaceful night I had experienced in a long time. The next morning, I called Rachel from the hotel phone and arranged to work remotely for the remainder of the week. She asked no questions beyond confirming which files I would need access to. With Sarah's guidance, I contacted my bank to secure my accounts. The customer service representative seemed unsurprised by my request to remove James's access and establish new security protocols. I wondered how many women like me they spoke to each day. We should document what's happening, Sarah suggested during her morning visit. Establishing a record can be important later. I began keeping a detailed log of James's communications, taking screenshots of messages, recording times of calls, and noting the content when voicemails became increasingly hostile. You're making a fool of yourself, one message hissed. Everyone will know you had a breakdown if you don't come home now. Michael continued to provide security, always professional but unfailingly supportive. He helped me develop safe routes to and from necessary meetings, ensured secure transportation, and maintained a watchful presence without being intrusive. 3 days into my hotel stay, after consultations with the domestic abuse counselor and a lawyer Sarah had recommended, I made my decision. I would not be returning to the home I shared with James. I need a safety plan, I told Sarah during our daily check-in. She nodded, unsurprised. We've already begun developing one. Let's go through the details. That afternoon, as I sat with Sarah reviewing security protocols for my new situation, I received a text from an unknown number. It contained a single photo of the hotel where I was staying. No message, just the image. I showed it to Sarah, my hands trembling slightly. He's escalating, she said calmly, immediately texting Michael. Within minutes, Michael had confirmed with hotel security that James had been seen in the lobby asking questions about guests. He hadn't discovered my room number, but the implied threat was clear. This changes our timeline, Sarah said. We need to move you today. By evening, I was installed in a secure apartment building where Michael's security firm maintained several units for clients in transition. The building had 24-hour security restricted access and no connection to my name. That night, as I sat in the sparsely furnished but safe apartment, I felt the full weight of my decision. I was leaving my marriage, my home, and the life I had built. Yet beneath the grief and fear ran a current of something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. 7 days after James abandoned me on that rainy road, I filed for an emergency restraining order. The judge reviewed my documentation, the threatening messages, the photo of the hotel statements from Michael and hotel security about James's attempts to locate me, and my detailed account of the abandonment incident. "The court finds sufficient evidence to grant a temporary restraining order," the judge announced. "The respondent is to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from the petitioner and have no contact through any means." The official language transformed my personal nightmare into a legal matter, lending validation to fears I had previously dismissed. James would be served with the order within 24 hours. With the restraining order in place, Michael coordinated a security team to retrieve essential items from my home. The operation was planned with military precision, a 2-hour window. When James would be at his office, 3 security professionals, in addition to Michael, and a detailed inventory of items to collect. I provided them with a floor plan of the house and the location of important documents, clothes, and irreplaceable personal items. My laptop backup drives and professional equipment were high on the list. "We'll be in and out efficiently," Michael assured me. "The police have been notified about the restraining order and our planned retrieval." The team returned with several suitcases and boxes containing my most important possessions. Among them was the crystal award James had tried to discard, now wrapped carefully in one of my sweaters. That same evening, James was served with the restraining order. His reaction was swift and explosive. A barrage of messages from unknown numbers and mutual friends began immediately. "He says you're having a mental breakdown," reported one concerned friend. "He's worried sick about you. James told everyone you're working with sensitive government information and had some kind of security breach." Another friend texted, "Is that why you disappeared?" The narrative James was creating portrayed him as the concerned husband and me as unstable, paranoid, or compromised. It was a calculated attempt to undermine my credibility and isolate me further. I moved into a furnished apartment in a secure building downtown close to my office, but in a neighborhood where James rarely ventured. The building had secure entry, 24-hour concierge, and a no-visitor policy I could activate as needed. Support arrived from unexpected quarters. When I finally felt secure enough to call a client and explain my limited availability, her response surprised me. "Take the time you need," she said without hesitation. "We've worked with other consultants who've been in similar situations. Your safety comes first, and your job will be here when you're ready." Her understanding made me wonder how common my situation truly was. How many other professional women maintained polished exteriors while enduring private control and humiliation. Gradually, I began reconnecting with friends and family from whom I'd been isolated. Some relationships were too damaged to immediately repair, but others offered forgiveness and support I hadn't dared hope for. "I knew something was wrong," my college roommate said during our first call in over a year. "You stopped sounding like yourself. I should have tried harder to reach you." "It wasn't your fault," I assured her, a truth I was still learning to apply to myself as well. As my support network rebuilt, my confidence began to return. I scheduled a meeting with my attorney and filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and including the restraining order in the documentation. James's response was predictable. He refused the initial terms and demanded mediation, a tactic the lawyer warned me was common in cases involving controlling partners. "He wants face-to-face contact," she explained. "We can insist on separate mediation sessions or move directly to court proceedings." 2 weeks after filing, I returned to work full-time. Michael's security firm continued providing protection, though we adjusted the protocols to be less visible. He remained my primary security detail for client meetings and travel a professional relationship that had evolved to include deep trust. Despite the restraining order, James found ways to make his presence felt. Mutual friends would mention his concerns about my mental health. Colleagues would reference running into him at industry events where he would inquire about my projects. A gift basket with no card arrived at my office containing items only James would know I preferred. Each incident was documented and reported to my attorney, building a case of continued harassment despite the legal boundaries in place. The note left on my car marked another escalation. After a dinner meeting with clients, I returned to the parking garage to find an envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. Inside was a handwritten note in familiar handwriting. "You can't hide forever. We need to talk like adults." The parking garage had security cameras. Michael immediately requested the footage, which showed a hooded figure approaching my car around 7 p.m. Despite the disguise, the build and movement pattern were recognizable. "It's James," Michael confirmed after reviewing the footage. "He's violated the restraining order." We reported the incident to the police, providing the security footage as evidence. 3 days later, James was called to court for the violation. I testified about the pattern of control, the abandonment incident, and the subsequent harassment. Standing in the courtroom facing James directly for the first time since that rainy night, I felt a strength I had thought lost forever. "The respondent has willfully violated the terms of the restraining order," the judge concluded. "The order will be extended for 1 year with additional provisions regarding third-party contact. Any further violations could result in criminal charges." James's face remained impassive during the ruling, but I caught the flash of anger in his eyes. He had always hated losing control, and now it was happening publicly, officially. The extended restraining order provided a measure of security, but the real victory was internal. I had spoken my truth, stood my ground, and been believed. After months of doubting my own perceptions, the validation was powerfully healing. 1 month after the court appearance, I delivered my first major client presentation since leaving James. Standing before a room of security professionals, I felt a momentary flutter of the self-doubt James had cultivated so carefully. What if I'm not prepared enough? What if they see through me? What if I've lost my edge? I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and began speaking about advanced threat detection methodologies. The questions that followed were engaged and thoughtful. The discussion was vigorous and productive. When I concluded, the room broke into spontaneous applause. "That was the most comprehensive overview of the subject I've heard," one CISO commented afterward. "We'd like to explore implementing your recommendations immediately." As I gathered my materials, I caught Michael's eye from his position at the back of the room. He gave me a small nod, a gesture of professional approval that meant more than the applause of the entire room. Walking to the car afterward, my step was lighter than it had been in months. The woman who had stood in the rain that night, abandoned and shivering, was still part of me, but she was no longer all of me. I was reclaiming the pieces of myself that James had tried to erase, one presentation, one decision, 1 day at a time. The finalization of my divorce came 6 months after James left me on that rural road. After multiple attempts to delay proceedings and force face-to-face meetings, he finally realized I wouldn't be manipulated back into his control. The settlement was clean but costly. I surrendered claims to our shared home and certain investments to avoid prolonged legal battles, a decision my attorney initially questioned. "You're entitled to more," she argued. "We can fight for it." "I have what I need," I replied. My freedom is worth more than the house. The day the papers were signed, I stood outside the courthouse feeling lighter, as though invisible chains had finally fallen away. Michael waited by the car, maintaining his usual professional distance while ensuring my security. "It's done," I told him, approaching the vehicle. "Congratulations," he replied simply. "Where to now?" That question extended beyond our immediate destination. Where to now, indeed? With my marriage officially ended, I faced rebuilding my life entirely on my terms, an exhilarating and intimidating prospect. I decided to start with a new home. The secure apartment had served its purpose, but it never felt like mine. I purchased a modern condominium in a building with excellent security features, including keycard access, 24-hour doorman, and a secure parking garage. The process of furnishing and decorating became unexpectedly therapeutic. Every choice, from the color of the walls to the arrangement of furniture, was mine alone. No one questioned my preferences or dismissed my opinions. The resulting space reflected my personality in ways my previous home never had. My security measures remained robust. Though James had seemingly accepted the finality of our separation, the patterns established during our marriage suggested caution was warranted. I maintained a security system that Michael personally vetted, and his firm continued providing protection for professional engagements. Our professional relationship had evolved into a friendship that respected appropriate boundaries. Michael never crossed the line between security provider and personal involvement, but his consistent presence offered stability during my transition. Most clients reduce their security after resolution of the immediate threat, he mentioned during a drive to a client meeting. "Would you like to discuss adjusted protocols?" I considered the question carefully. "Not yet," I decided. Professional security still makes sense given my client list, regardless of personal circumstances. He nodded, neither encouraging nor discouraging the decision. That neutrality, the respect for my agency without attempt to influence, remained one of the things I valued most about our working relationship. Therapy became an essential part of my healing process. Weekly sessions with Lisa, the domestic abuse counselor, who had initially helped me, provided space to process my experiences and recognize patterns I wanted to avoid in future relationships. "You were targeted precisely because of your strength and success," Lisa explained during one session. Contrary to popular belief, abusers often select partners with significant resources and capabilities. The challenge of controlling someone powerful can be appealing to them. This perspective helped address the shame I had felt about being manipulated despite my intelligence and professional acumen. The skills that made me effective in identifying digital security threats hadn't translated to recognizing personal ones. "We're trained to look for certain types of threats," I realized aloud. I was scanning for the wrong indicators in my personal life. As part of my healing, I began developing a side project, a training program for professionals about recognizing workplace control dynamics. The project combined my security expertise with my personal experience, creating something meaningful from my painful past. The program focused on identifying boundary violations in professional contexts, recognizing gaslighting techniques, and establishing personal security practices. I piloted it with a small group of women in tech, and their response was overwhelmingly positive. "I never had language for what was happening with my business partner," one participant shared. "Now I can name the manipulation techniques and respond appropriately." 6 months after my divorce, I was invited to speak at a Women in Technology conference. My presentation on personal security beyond passwords incorporated elements of my training program, touching on both digital and interpersonal security without directly referencing my experience. After the presentation, a woman approached me privately. Your points about information compartmentalization saved my career, she confided. My ex was using shared access to sabotage my work, just like you described. These moments of connection reinforced my commitment to the work. Each person who recognized their situation in my carefully anonymized examples validated my decision to transform my experience into education. The holiday season arrived my first as a single woman again. Rather than feeling lonely, I embraced the opportunity to create new traditions. I hosted a small gathering for friends who had supported me throughout the year, including Rachel, my assistant, who had managed my professional life during the crisis. I never thanked you properly, I told her during a quiet moment at the party. You kept everything running when I couldn't. That's what teams do, she replied simply. And we're a good team. My parents visited from Wisconsin, their first trip since the divorce. My mother had initially struggled to understand why I had ended a marriage that appeared perfect from the outside. I just want you to be happy, she said, as we prepared dinner together in my new kitchen. Are you happy? I considered the question seriously. I'm peaceful, I answered finally. Happiness comes and goes, but peace is something I haven't felt in years. So yes, I think I am happy in a deeper way than before. She nodded, seeming to understand something fundamental about my journey. My final encounter with James occurred at an industry gala 8 months after our divorce. I had known he might attend, but refused to let his potential presence dictate my professional engagements. Michael and a female security colleague accompanied me, positioned strategically throughout the venue. When James spotted me across the room, he immediately changed direction, heading directly toward me, despite the restraining order that remained in effect. Michael intercepted him smoothly before he could reach me. Their conversation was brief and appeared cordial to observers, but James's expression darkened as Michael firmly redirected him toward the exit.
He won't be returning,
Michael informed me discreetly.
The event security has been notified of the restraining order violation.
They're escorting him out and documenting the incident. This violation proved to be the final straw. With video evidence from the gala and documentation of previous incidents, the district attorney decided to pursue charges for repeated restraining order violations. James ultimately accepted a plea deal including mandatory counseling and community service. Throughout this period, I continued rebuilding my professional reputation. The clients I had feared losing due to the disruption of my personal life proved remarkably understanding. My work resumed its previous quality and then exceeded it, informed by a new perspective on vulnerability and resilience. The security firm assigned me a second team member for certain engagements, a woman named Taylor who specialized in low-profile protective services. She became another trusted colleague, offering a different perspective on security protocols. You've established excellent boundaries, she observed during a security review. Most clients take much longer to develop these practices. I had good teachers, I replied, thinking of Michael, Sarah, and even James, who had unwittingly taught me exactly what to guard against. As the 1-year anniversary of that rainy night approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey. The woman abandoned on that rural road seemed both intimately familiar and distantly removed from who I had become. I had learned to recognize red flags I once dismissed: love bombing disguised as romance isolation, masked as exclusivity control presented as care. I had developed an awareness of my own boundaries and the resolve to maintain them. Most importantly, I had discovered my capacity for rebuilding after devastation. The security measures that once felt like admission of vulnerability now represented self-care and wisdom. I wasn't paranoid or damaged. I was prudent, protecting the life I had reconstructed with such care. My relationship with Michael maintained its professional foundation while acknowledging the unique circumstances that had shaped our working dynamic. He remained my primary security detail for important engagements, a constant I valued in a landscape that had changed so dramatically.
Anniversary coming up,
he noted as we drove to a client meeting exactly 1 year after the abandonment incident.
Yes,
I acknowledged, appreciating that he remembered without needing to elaborate.
Any plans?
He asked. I smiled slightly. Actually, yes. I'm taking myself to dinner at that restaurant James left me at. Reclaiming the space, I suppose. He nodded approvingly.
Good strategy.
Yeah. That evening, dining alone at a table with a view of the city lights, I raised a glass to myself, to the woman who had stood in the rain, to the woman who had found the strength to leave, and to the woman I was becoming with each passing day. The lesson James had intended to teach that night wasn't the one I learned. He had meant to show me my dependence, my vulnerability, my need to submit. Instead, I discovered my resilience, my worth, and my capacity for transformation. The rain that soaked me became the water that helped me grow into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate, not just toward others, but finally, crucially, toward myself. James's cruelty had indeed ended that night, though not as he expected. His last mistake wasn't leaving me in the rain. It was underestimating who I would become once the storm had passed. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's attempt to break you actually set you free? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more stories of resilience and transformation. And remember, sometimes what looks like the end of your story is really just the beginning of a better one. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find strength in your own.